Mexico sits in the southern half of North America, directly below the United States, bordered by Guatemala and Belize to the south. On one side lies the Pacific Ocean. On the other, the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean Sea. That location changed everything. Geographically, Mexico belongs to North America, but culturally, it carries the soul of Latin America in almost every part of daily life. The country covers nearly 2 million square kilometers, making it one of the largest nations in Latin America. And despite what many outsiders imagine, Mexico is far more diverse than deserts and dusty border towns. In the north, massive deserts stretch across dry mountains and industrial cities near the U.S. border. In the center, high plateaus rise thousands of meters above sea level, including Mexico City itself. And that surprises a lot of people, because despite its tropical image, Mexico City actually has a relatively mild climate. The city sits more than 2,000 meters above sea level, making it cooler than many expect. Yet it remains one of the largest urban centers on Earth, crowded, chaotic, modern, and constantly moving. But beneath that modern city lies another world. Long before the Spanish arrived, this region was the heart of the Aztec Empire. Their capital, Tenochtitlan, was built on a lake in the exact area where Mexico City stands today. At its peak, it was one of the most astonishing cities in the Americas. Then came 1521. The Spanish conquered the Aztec Empire and began nearly 300 years of colonial rule. Catholicism arrived. So did the Spanish language, European architecture, and a completely new political order. But Mexico was never fully erased. Instead, something more complicated happened. Over centuries, indigenous traditions blended with European influence, creating a culture unlike anywhere else on Earth. Even today, Mexico still carries both worlds at once. Spanish churches stand beside indigenous rituals. Ancient traditions survive beneath modern life. Local languages still echo through villages far from tourist zones. And nowhere is that fusion more obvious than in Mexican food. Corn, beans, chili peppers, and cacao from indigenous civilizations mixed with European meats, dairy, and cooking techniques. The result became one of the most recognizable cuisines in the world. Toward the southeast, Mexico transforms again. The Yucatan Peninsula feels completely different. Dense jungles, underground cenotes, ancient Maya ruins, and Caribbean beaches so blue they almost look unreal. Places like Cancun, Tulum, and Playa del Carmen became global tourism giants. But hidden among the resorts are reminders of a much older civilization. Massive pyramids like Chichen Itza still rise from the jungle, quietly reminding visitors that Mexico is not just selling paradise, it's standing on top of one of humanity's great ancient worlds. The economy, America's neighbor, factory, and pressure valve. A lot of people still imagine Mexico as a poor country trapped in cartel chaos. That image misses the bigger picture. Mexico is actually one of the largest economies in Latin America, with a GDP worth more than $1.8 trillion. And its greatest advantage is simple: location. Being right next to the United States turned Mexico into a manufacturing powerhouse. Across northern Mexico, industrial cities are packed with factories producing cars, electronics, medical equipment, appliances, and machinery for the American market. For global companies, Mexico offers something incredibly valuable: lower labor costs than the US, while staying physically close to American consumers. That matters even more now, as global supply chains shift away from distant manufacturing hubs. But industry is only part of the story. Tourism is another giant pillar of the economy. Every year, tens of millions of visitors arrive for beaches, ruins, food, nightlife, and culture. Entire coastal regions depend almost completely on tourism jobs. And then there's remittance money. Millions of Mexicans live and work in the United States, sending billions of dollars back home every year. In some rural communities, that money isn't extra income, it's survival. It pays for homes, school tuition, medicine, family businesses. Agriculture still plays a major role too. Mexico exports avocados, chili peppers, coffee, tropical fruits, and countless other crops. Mexican avocados in particular became a massive industry tied directly to American demand. But Mexico's biggest economic problem is inequality. Northern states connected to US trade often have better infrastructure, more factories, and higher wages. Meanwhile, many southern regions remain poorer, more rural, and heavily indigenous. So within one country, there are almost two Mexicos, one modern, industrial, globally connected, the other struggling with poverty, limited opportunity, and weak infrastructure. And for many people, that imbalance pushes them toward one dream: crossing north. For millions, migration to the United States isn't about luxury. It's about survival. If wages are too low, opportunities too limited, and the future feels closed off, the border becomes a risk worth taking. Mexico today stands at a crossroads. It has the chance to become one of North America's most important industrial centers. But that future depends on whether economic growth can actually reach ordinary people, and whether entire regions stop feeling abandoned. Cartels, borders, and the shadow over Mexico. To understand modern Mexico, you eventually run into one word: cartels. These aren't just street gangs. Many cartel organizations operate like underground corporations, with money, weapons, transportation networks, intelligence systems, and influence that can reach deep into local communities. And geography made their rise almost inevitable. Mexico shares a border more than 3,000 kilometers long with the United States, one of the world's largest illegal drug markets. For legal trade, that border is an economic goldmine. For organized crime, it became a trafficking superhighway. Over decades, Mexican cartels built massive networks moving cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and fentanyl north into the U.S. Groups like the Sinaloa Cartel and Jalisco New Generation Cartel became globally known. But what makes the violence so difficult to stop is fragmentation. When one cartel weakens, smaller factions often split off and begin fighting each other for territory. And the business expanded far beyond drugs. In many regions, criminal groups became involved in extortion, kidnapping, human trafficking, migrant smuggling, weapons trafficking, and even controlling parts of local economies. For some shop owners, drivers, or farmers, paying protection money became part of everyday life. Meanwhile, the flow never goes one direction. Drugs move north, but money and weapons often move south. That cycle keeps feeding the violence. And nowhere is that tension more visible than along the U.S. Mexico border. Every day, thousands of trucks carrying legal goods cross between the two countries. Factories operate nonstop. Cities like Tijuana and Ciudad Juarez became major industrial hubs. But the same corridors also became hotspots for trafficking, smuggling, migration routes, and organized crime. For migrants traveling through Mexico, the journey can become terrifying. People from Central America, South America, and the Caribbean cross the country hoping to reach the United States. Some ride freight trains, others walk through deserts. Many pay smugglers. Along the way, they risk robbery, extortion, kidnapping, assault, or simply being abandoned in deadly terrain. Women and children are especially vulnerable. Yet despite all this, Mexico is not a country consumed entirely by violence. Most Mexicans still live ordinary lives. They work, study, raise families, run businesses, go to football games, celebrate holidays, and build communities. Tourist areas still attract millions. Many cities remain vibrant and functional. But the shadow of cartel power continues shaping the country's image and the daily reality of millions who live there. Culture, the real heartbeat of Mexico. To truly understand Mexico, you have to stop looking only at the headlines. Because the real soul of the country lives in its streets. It's there in the smell of grilled meat rising from taco stands at midnight, in morning tamales wrapped in steam, in crowded markets overflowing with chili peppers, lime, avocado, cilantro, and corn. Corn, especially, is almost sacred here. Tortillas aren't just food in Mexico. They're part of identity itself. Many Mexicans eat them daily the way rice functions in many Asian cultures. And Mexican food doesn't try to be subtle. It's bold, loud, smoky, spicy, deeply emotional. Even simple street tacos can carry layers of flavor that feel tied to centuries of history. Then there's the music. Mariachi bands in restaurants. Ranchera songs echoing through plazas. Banda music blasting at weddings and neighborhood parties. Music in Mexico isn't background noise. It's storytelling. Songs about heartbreak, pride, family, loss, love, homeland, survival. And that emotional intensity shapes everyday life too. Mexicans often communicate with enormous energy through gestures, tone, humor, emotion. Streets feel alive because people bring life into them. Color matters here. Bright painted walls, murals, decorations, markets, festivals, public squares full of noise and conversation. Even grief becomes visual. One of the most famous examples is Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead, where remembrance turns into celebration. Flowers, candles, music, and food transform mourning into something strangely beautiful. That ability to face hardship while still celebrating life may be one of Mexico's deepest cultural traits. Because beneath the warmth and color, many people understand their country can also be difficult and dangerous. In some places, locals know which streets to avoid, when not to go out, and which subjects are safer left unspoken. Yet somehow, people still hold on to joy. That resilience defines Mexico. Women also play a huge role in the country's cultural identity. Mexican women are often associated with beauty, confidence, and strong family traditions. But beyond appearances, many are central to preserving culture itself, through food, rituals, celebrations, religion, and memory passed between generations. Football carries a similar emotional weight. On major match days, entire neighborhoods can stop to watch together. In Mexico, football isn't just entertainment. It's national identity, shared emotion, collective hope. And maybe that's the best way to describe Mexico as a whole. A country that turns emotion into culture. It turns pain into songs, death into festivals, corn and chili into identity, and crowded streets into a stage where life never fully slows down. Conclusion: Mexico is one of the most layered countries in the world. Ancient civilizations, massive cities, stunning coastlines, industrial power, deep inequality, cartel violence, rich traditions, endless movement. It's beautiful, complicated, exhausting, alive. And maybe that's why Mexico keeps pulling people back, because the country never feels simple. You can't understand it just by looking at beaches or crime statistics. You have to look at the people themselves, how they eat, celebrate, survive, migrate, remember, and protect their identity through generations of chaos and change. That's Mexico, a country full of color and contradiction, a place both warm and dangerous, ancient and modern, broken in some ways, but still overflowing with life.